I just go back to the get started. I understand it's abstract and I get the fears and anxieties people have about it, but everybody's feeling those things. And some people are going to choose to just move forward and do something. And other people are going to just get wrapped up in those things and sit still. And I would strongly encourage people to be on the side of the future that is doing something about it, because I think there could be less than desirable outcomes in different businesses and career paths who don't do anything. And I don't want that for people. There's so much incredible free information and education here, not just with our stuff, but like everywhere. Like people share so much every day about the prompts they're using, the use cases they've found. Like it is not hard to go get it. You do not need to go back to school to do this. You don't need to become a data scientist. The future of all of this is human language. If you have words and you have expertise, like you can get value from these tools. And that's how I kind of think about it. Like I have no coding ability at all. And I have now built 5 GPTs that have like transformed my own life and are starting to transform our business and other businesses with 0 programming ability. And that's the future I think is there for people. It's like, know what the tech is capable of. Take your domain expertise and experience and instinct and like work with these tools to create this future.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. It's been a couple of years since you and I talked, unfortunately, but that said, I'm super excited to catch up, especially because, again, you were one of the pioneers. Once again, you always seem to be pioneering in whatever ecosystem you and I are in, with seeing the opportunity in AI, specifically in marketing. But I think even you've now evolved beyond just marketing, and with the Marketing Artificial Intelligence Institute, and now more recently, SmarterX, which is just exactly what the market is looking for, which is AI literacy. And then, of course, the reminder of the artificial intelligence show, the podcast, where again, you're always talking about relevant things that are happening in the world right now with regards to artificial intelligence. This show, RevOps Champions, is typically more about, the thesis is, why do some businesses in whatever industry scale better than others? You know, when they seemingly have access to the same capital, they have the same headcount, they should and maybe have all the same systems. Why do some businesses scale better than others? I think today we're probably going to deviate a little bit, just because we know that with our current clients and our future clients, navigating AI, which ultimately is, well, I guess this was going to be a question for you ultimately. The business that we're in at Dennewill is helping businesses navigate changes in technology and how that impacts how they stay connected and build stronger relationships with their customers, right? Where I'm at right now is AI is just another version of that. It's technology, which is potentially an exponential to a lot of the technology we've been working on for the last 15 years. But maybe how would you say AI is different to the technology that you and I have been involved in for the last 15 years, and how our clients, so businesses who are trying to adopt new technology, how is AI going to be different to, for example, marketing software or CRM or ERP? What makes AI different? Or is it different?
Yeah, it is fundamentally different. I think in a lot of ways, it's just the next phase of transformation, that organizations go through and that we have guided organizations through and we think about for ourselves. But what makes this era different is we grew up in a deterministic world where software did what you told it to do. Humans wrote the rules. So someone built software, then you and I, your clients, people used that software to do something. But the human told it what to do, and it didn't think on its own. It didn't use reasoning. It couldn't create something from nothing, from words. So we entered this era where the software, the AI, can now think, reason, create text, image, video, audio, code. It can do all of these things that up until 2 years ago, it couldn't do. And so it became probabilistic. It sort of determines its own path many times. And so I think that's the biggest change is it is intelligence on demand. And it's up to us as the human users to figure out how to best apply that technology. So we have Sora just came out, the video generation from OpenAI. Someone who's a video producer who lives that world can probably jump in today and start getting value from Sora. I'm not. Like, I could create fun things to show my family. I'm not going to go in there and like produce a 5-minute film stitching together a bunch of 20-second clips. But I guarantee you by the end of the day today, people are. Like, it's going to be professionals who know what they're doing who are going to go use those tools in fascinating ways. And so I think that's the era we're entering is now these things can really think, create, understand, reason. And now it's on us to figure out how do we use this sort of like alien technology, this new intelligence that we're still trying to understand how it even works in many cases, even language models. Like, we're not really sure exactly how they do what they do. And so I think that's what makes it different is the capabilities are far different than just traditional software that only did what we told it to do. We wrote all the rules and it followed them.
The obvious thing is just the pace, right? So the whole reasoning ability of AI, it was on the radar, but suddenly last week when it was introduced through ChatGPT 01, it's like, oh, here it is. Okay. So whatever leadership teams and meeting rooms across the world were doing 2 weeks ago, suddenly they're asking themselves different questions this week, which is related to how we're going to incorporate AI that can now help us reason, and how does that change how we build our teams or how we support our teams. And again, so the list goes on, and what do we call these things, right? Do we call them agents, or what do we call them? And do we need to be more specific than agents now? Even, so a month ago, people were still trying to educate themselves about agents. Now it's like, okay, well, how do you differentiate between different agents? Now that they, some can actually reason and others, you don't necessarily need them to reason. So the thing that I keep coming back to is that it does come back to how do organizations introduce. So you mentioned transformation earlier, right? It's always it's the next phase of transformation. How do leadership teams and businesses now introduce this? And ultimately it comes down to change management, right? So how do you introduce and manage that change within the organization? Do you have any insights or advice on that?
Yeah. So I think most enterprises of all sizes really are still actually just trying to figure out how to get value from AI. There's most organizations that we talk to are still at the early stages of adoption. They're trying to find use cases. They're trying to pilot these things across different departments. Many big organizations are just buying a bunch of Copilot licenses from Microsoft and saying, okay, team, you now have Copilot. Or if you're a Google workspace shop, maybe you've given your team Google Gemini, or maybe you're going and getting ChatGPT team or enterprise for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just give those licenses out and expect people to figure out what to do with them. So that's honestly where most of the opportunity currently lies as we early into 2025, we start to kind of look through the year ahead. It's to start stacking very practical use cases for people. If you're going to go get Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT, when you provide those licenses to your team, do it within a dynamic environment where you are training them on use cases from day one. We're going to give you these licenses, but you marketer, you salesperson, you customer service rep, you HR person, here are 3 use cases we've already identified that we think will be very valuable to you. And we've actually built you a custom GPT to do it. Like, it's just hold their hand so that they see the value right away. Because what's happening in a lot of organizations is they are thinking about the change management. They're thinking about the bigger picture of scaling this and the full-blown transformation. And sometimes they're skipping over, well, let's just prove it works first. Let's get people on board, because there's a lot of people afraid of this technology, like fearing for their jobs. And it's abstract. Like, it's a weird topic if you haven't played in it. And so I think that's where a lot of people are missing it, is like, let's walk before we run with this stuff. And yeah, we need to think about transformation and change management, but none of that's going to matter if we don't get people buying into the opportunity here first.
Yeah, which is absolutely the way, I keep thinking about it is how do we embrace the opportunity again, and just having that mindset versus how do we face this challenge of navigating it. It really is how are you going to embrace this opportunity to really maximize the value of AI in your business. I think that example you gave of stacking and training on specific use cases in different departments or different roles, specifically in an organization, ultimately it does come down to leadership is about making decisions, right? And I think the leaders who do make decisions are the ones who are going to get ahead of this sooner, and the ones who don't, as always. I mean, this is where some things change and some things don't change when it comes to, in this case, how you embrace technology as it evolves. So it's making decisions, whether even if they're micro decisions, but just make a decision, test it out, move on. But then the other part of it is also, of course, the investment component, which is really hard to wrap your head around as a leader today. And then the investment piece has two components. It's sort of, is there a cost/investment? But how do we get an ROI, right? Or what is the ROI? Do you have any thoughts that you could share where it becomes accessible for businesses to really make a decision that'll move them forward, right? The first step in this marathon. But then how do they look at it from an investment/ROI perspective?
Yeah, so the way we always teach people, even if you start with these pilot projects, like let's say you're going to get ChatGPT team and you're going to do it for 90 days and you're going to try and see if you're going to get the $30 per user value or whatever it's costing. I would go in and each pilot project you're going to do, you would set benchmarks. And so your main outcomes are going to be efficiencies. They're going to do what you're doing faster. Productivity, you're going to produce more in the same amount of time. Revenue could be a little harder to directly prove right away in like a pilot phase, like over 90 days, but revenue is certainly one. Profitability is probably going to trickle down from the other three things. So you can become more profitable over time. So what I always guide people is like pick a pilot project. So let's say, for example, we're doing a podcast right now. Let's say you have a podcast and you can document all the tasks that go into planning, producing, and promoting the podcast. And so you identify all these tasks and you go through and build out, okay, how much time roughly? I get that everyone doesn't track their time, but you could, for an episode or two, track your time and say, here's how much time it takes us to do each task. Now let's go get a tool like Descript, or we'll use Anthropic Claude or ChatGPT in different pieces of this process. And let's identify which tasks for the podcast campaign each week we're going to use AI for. And then we're going to do that for 3, 4, 5 episodes. And then we're going to monitor how much things improve in that process. And then the other thing that we found, because we do this for our own podcast, and we estimate about 30 hours a week, roughly, we save using Descript and these other tools. The other key is not only did we do the tasks more efficiently, we introduced new elements to the campaign that drove audience growth, which we know drives revenue, because a lot of our speaking engagements, workshop opportunities, consulting work comes from the podcast. So the way we do that, as an example, we record each podcast, we publish it on YouTube and podcast networks. So there's video and audio. We use AI to automatically create the shorts, the video shorts that we then publish to TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and wherever else the team pushes this stuff out. We weren't doing that before. So AI enabled us to create a new element to the campaign that in some cases will get tens of thousands of views on social channels that we just weren't even doing and wouldn't have done because it would have taken too much time. And now it happens almost instantly by letting the AI just create these clips. And so that's just a campaign that we know we're saving at least 30 hours a week on. So, I mean, you're almost talking about an FTE when we do 4 podcasts a month. So that's 120 hours that we're saving. That's basically an FTE in an agency setting. That's about what we would target to do for an agency, is 120 hours of billable work per employee per month. Now you do that across content creation, the blog. You do it across email, proposal development, article writing, script writing, like whatever it is you do. And so that's why we always tell people the way to think about this is you look at your job and you break that into tasks and you find ways to use AI into what you already do. And then you look at your job and say, okay, what campaigns do I run, or does my team run, or does my organization run? And you find ways to infuse it into that.
Mm-hmm.
If you just do those two things, I promise you, you will get an ROI from any of the LMS platforms. But like ChatGPT is the main one we use. And I mean, I have instances where I know they just introduced a pro plan for $200 a month. I would honestly pay over $2,000 a month right now for ChatGPT. I get that much value from that platform every day. Like, it's almost criminal to me that I'm only paying $30 a month for the value I extract from ChatGPT. So that's how I kind of look at it. It's like, you just have to be intentional about finding use cases, benchmarking existing performance, and then running a pilot very intentionally to improve whatever your KPIs are. Again, it could be you just do it faster. It could be you go from 4 podcasts to 8 podcasts a month for the same amount of talent. Like, nobody loses their job. We're just like, great, like, we can do it at half the time. Let's do 4 more episodes a month. And that's how I like to think about it, is let AI be additive. Let's not use it as a means to like reduce workforce. Let's actually just do more, produce more, create more value.
So one of the areas that even I get stuck in, but I think is a challenge for a lot of other business leaders, is when you have to start using multiple AI tools in order to complete a task, right? Which is why agents, for all absolutely the right reasons, are all the rage right now. In the example that you gave with AI producing the clips from the podcast, whether it's the audio and or the video, are you using one tool, or is it multiple tools to come up with those 3 clips per episode or whatever you tell it to do?
Yeah, I think the team mostly uses Descript now. We used to use Opus Clips. They may still use Opus Clips in some capacity. But I think the podcast one is primarily down to Descript. But like in the planning side, Mike uses, so my co-host, I know he uses a collection of tools like Perplexity. I think he uses Claude. Pretty sure he still uses ChatGPT. So he's using sort of a symphony of tools to do a lot of like the research and planning and outlining that he does in preparation for each episode. I mean, if you took the whole tech stack and said, what tools are we using for the podcast between the 5 of us who work on the thing, I wouldn't be shocked if there aren't 10 AI tools in that stack. But I would say like 80% of the usage is most likely Perplexity and ChatGPT and Descript.
In this case, are you using, or would folks listening use, a Zapier or some other integration tool to sort of create the entire workflow where you're essentially telling it, use this tool for this, use this tool for that, use that tool for that? Or is it just literally going from tool to tool? Or is there still some manual stuff where your team, for example, like other teams, is using Descript for one thing, ChatGPT for another, it's Perplexity for another?
Yeah, in this workflow, I don't know that we'd gain too much from setting up a bunch of Zaps or integrations to try and automate different pieces of it. I think that for us, there's still a lot of human in the loop. There's still a lot of learning. There's still a lot of intuition and decisions being made by humans in all components of the workflow. I don't know we're at the point where we would really see much value from the automation of it. Yeah, it's something we look at. I mean, we're looking at that for analytics would be an example. Like business intelligence is an area where I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to do more with automation, where we're kind of setting these rules. And I think that crosses into that, like, well, is that an agent? Like, are we building an AI agent? And this is where the market's created a lot of confusion. These tech companies have created a lot of confusion around what exactly an AI agent is. In many cases, what people are talking about as AI agents is really just traditional automation where you're setting up these integrations to do a thing. And the model isn't making decisions on its own. It's literally just doing a rules-based, following what the human told it to do. Whereas the traditional AI research lab version of an AI agent is tell it a goal and it goes and does the thing. It figures out how to do it. But that is not where we are with agents. They're basically rules-based automations that use AI tools in some aspect of their workflow.
So your advice is looking for these specific use cases. In other words, like, what is my job? What am I doing? How can I use AI tools to make my time more productive and efficient? And that thinking will ultimately, so once teams start doing that for 30, 60, 90 days, at the end of a quarter, and they all come back together and say, oh, this is how I did this, and these are the benefits. If you benchmark that before you started, and now you benchmark it again, you go, oh, actually, I saw a 40, 50, 60% lift or improvement. I guess at that point is probably where you start to connect dots and say, oh, well, then have 3 more people do something similar to that. And eventually, so it's almost like a bottom up approach, right?
I generally kind of guide that way. So the way we advise people is everybody should have an AI roadmap, but that AI roadmap is more dynamic than like a traditional marketing plan, say, where you set your budgets for the year, you kind of pick your big campaigns 12 months out. In the AI roadmap, you're looking and saying, okay, let's pretend we're just focused on the marketing department AI roadmap right now. Oftentimes we're advising like globally, like all the different departments, but let's zoom in on the marketing department. And let's say you're starting from scratch in 2025. Like people have been experimenting, but nobody's formally doing anything. Nobody's got approval and budgets to go buy AI tech, things like that. So what I would do is say, okay, like where are the quickest gains we can make? And I run these as like a workshop. So I would bring teams in, like the writing team, the SEO team, the web team, the demand team, like however your org is structured. I would teach them how to identify their own use cases. I built GPTs for free to do this. There's a jobs GPT and a campaigns GPT. So you can literally just put your job title in and it'll tell you what to do. So let's say you're doing this in a workshop environment. They can go through and identify like, hey, we think we've found something. Like we're doing 40 case studies this year. We think we could use these things to do those case studies in half the time. Great. That's a pretty good use case. Let's look there, writing team. All right, web team, what do you got? Well, it looks like we could use it to build our landing pages for all of our ads. And we do 200 of those a year. Great. That's a good. And so you start to prioritize these use cases, and you could do it across different teams within the marketing department. And then however you want to do it in a Google Sheets or Word, I don't care how you track it, but like these are the pilot programs that have been approved. Here is how we're going to benchmark each of them. Here's how we're going to monitor success. And then at the end of 90 days for each of those, we're going to make a decision that we keep going or we like move on to the next one. And each team might be able to handle 2, 3, 4, 5 of those, depending on how big your team is, where you may be running a dozen or more pilot projects in Q1 of 2025. And then the leadership team needs to be working on the bigger story of like the problems in the organization. And so they may be thinking about our audience growth is flatlined. What do we do about it? We're seeing an uptick in churn and we don't know how to solve that. Maybe AI can help us solve that more intelligently. Revenue has flatlined. Like we got to figure out, we got to find new markets, whatever it is. And so that's more of like a problem-based approach to using AI. And so I always think about these things running in parallel. You have these use cases that are very obvious, efficiency, productivity gain kind of things. And then you have this problem-based model where you're constantly looking and saying, maybe it's like one a quarter, like we're going to deal with churn in Q1 and we're going to try and find smarter ways to deal with churn. We're going to do demand in Q2. We're going to do audience growth in Q3, whatever it is. And so that's what an AI roadmap is to us. It's like this sort of dynamic thing. You're always adjusting it. You're always learning something and adapting. You're always sharing findings across the team. Hey, we learned this prompt that's working really well. We think everybody could benefit from this thing. And so that's how I think a lot of organizations are going to get ahead next year is they'll focus on education and training, like driving that AI literacy within their company. And then they will have a formal process in place to run pilot projects and pursue these like problem-based things.
Well, that's first of all super valuable, I think, to everyone listening. But it's a good segue into how are you evolving? So just if we just look at the Marketing AI Institute for now, how are you evolving your education and training going into 25? Or are you?
For like our external, like what we offer to people, that kind of thing? Yeah. So for years, I've been trying to solve this. So the way I think about it is everyone's on a learning journey with AI. A lot of people are at the very beginning, still trying to figure out what exactly it is, trying to process the signal from all the noise out there. And then there's other people who have like moved on, like they're power users of ChatGPT personally. Maybe they're not allowed to even use it in their company, but like they get it. They don't need to be told the value of AI or like how to use these tools. And then there's the scaling part, which is the change management stuff. Like we have an AI council, we have an AI roadmap, we have responsible AI principles, we have generative AI policies. We are like racing ahead, full-blown transformation. That is rare. There are not very many companies I would put in the scaling bucket today. So I think of this, kind of those three basic fundamentals of like beginning, piloting, scaling. And then within there, I think about the learning journey of an individual who may choose to come to us and say, my company's not supporting this, but this is the future and I want in. Like I want to move ahead in my career. And so they're independently trying to find their learning journey. And then there's the corporation side, the business transformation side. So you have personal transformation and business transformation, where maybe it's a CMO, maybe it's a CEO, maybe it's a head of HR, whoever it is that's coming to us and saying, we need to teach our team, like our marketing team or our whole organization. And so when I think about our role in that, I think about the different value components at each stage of that journey and like the ability for people to build these personalized journeys. And so last year was a lot about putting the basic building blocks in place. Like we have an intro to AI class I teach for free every month. We've had like 25,000 people go through that class in the last 2 years. Then we have Piloting AI, which is an on-demand paid series that's 18 courses and like it's meant to help you figure out all your use cases and things like that. And then I introduced in the summer of 24 Scaling AI, which is more for business leaders. And that's like the 5 steps to scaling AI. And so those are like the 3 foundational pieces of what we do. And so as we move into next year, I'm thinking much more deeply about how to leverage AI to drive true personalization and transformation at an individual and a team level. So if you were to come into our academy, for example, not just having those 3 choices, but actually having a learning journey recommended to you and then dynamically adjusted as you're moving through it. And that requires a depth of courses and content that we don't currently have through the academy. And it requires technology that we don't currently have. And so those are 2 core areas, technology and content, that we're really focused on investing in next year.
We know that there are a lot of people out there, just specifically on the leadership side, who are trying to figure out where can they go to a workshop or training, whether it's 1 day or 2 days or whatever, just to sort of wrap their head around how they think about this, whether it's for 2025 or any time in the future. Are you planning with all your academy training and the Marketing AI Institute, is that all primarily online training and virtual training?
The online academy is the online education. We do workshops. So right now they're primarily like private workshops where we'll go into a corporation and do them. Like I was just last week in Philly doing this. And so we'll go in and we'll run these. We have applied AI. We have a strategic leader workshop. We have an innovations workshop, like driving innovation and growth. And then we have like a prompting workshop that teaches people how to do prompting. And so those are like our 4 standard workshops where we would go in and teach them. We run those at MACON, our conference, every year. So when people sign up to come to MACON, they can choose a workshop and we have those workshops there. And then those are probably going to be made available through a series of other in-person events that we haven't introduced yet next year. So there'll be more live and in-person opportunities to do the workshop model. And then we have a series of virtual summits. We have an AI for Writers Summit, AI for agencies, and AI for B2B marketers. And B2B and writers are actually free. So our whole North Star is AI literacy for all. And so I make every effort to make as much of our education and content free as possible to at least get people to the confidence stage of like, I get it now. And then a lot of like the further in the learning journey stuff is where we try and make more of the paid model come into play, but we try and create as much value as possible at the free end of the spectrum as people are really trying to figure this out.
So in addition to MACON, which is once a year in the summer, the other things that you mentioned, do you think there's an opportunity for you to do maybe some sort of a quarterly mini MACON where people can meet up and actually go through a sort of a workshop trainings, or whether it's some sort of breakout sessions that go deeper into the training and readiness piece of this?
Yeah. So I would say, like, I think of Marketing Institute and in some ways SmarterX as a media event and education business, as like the core of what Marketing Institute does in particular. And so the media side is largely like our newsletter, our free downloads, like the blueprints, research reports, and then the podcast. And then the education is MACON, the virtual summits, and kind of like the new stuff that we'll be introducing. And then the education is mostly like the online courses. So I would say, I think about our event portfolio, and I'm very actively looking at ways we will expand that portfolio, including different formats, different geographic locations under the SmarterX umbrella, which I think of as kind of like the story beyond marketing, is how I kind of think of the purpose of SmarterX. There will be a host of events and different formats in different places for different audiences. So yeah, I think we haven't finalized anything, but I would imagine in 2025, we'll probably make a series of announcements related to different events that will be coming.
Well, if you're looking for a city, we'd like to put Minneapolis on the map if you're up for that. It's nice to have you back in the Twin Cities.
I loved it there when I was there a couple of times. Yeah.
Yeah. So Paul, then tell us a little bit about SmarterX, because that's still a relatively new and maybe lesser known thing that you're doing.
So it's smarterx.ai is the website. You can go learn more about it. But in essence, yeah. So what happened was when ChatGPT emerged, I started getting calls from leaders all around the world in education, in nonprofits, in government, CEOs and across different industries who had nothing to do with Marketing Institute. Like they're not marketing people. And so I started traveling the world, doing calls and meetings and presentations with these leaders. And so I knew for years there needed to be a home base for that audience, for the people that aren't going to come to a Marketing Institute site. And so I've always planned to create something. SmarterX, we had originally introduced in 2022 as the consulting arm of Marketing Institute. So we didn't talk much about it, but it was there, and I introduced it at Macon, and we were starting to do some limited advisory work. And so that brand just sort of morphed into the AI research and consulting firm, sort of the sister company to Marketing Institute. And so that's where our work lives today, where we're doing more research on the frontiers of AI about the economy and the impact on education and ethics and energy and infrastructure and like the whole much bigger story that anyone who listens to the podcast regularly, same deal happened. It used to be the Marketing AI show. In January of 24, we changed it to the artificial intelligence. So because so much of what we talk about that is relevant to marketers is also relevant to CEOs and government leaders and venture capitalists. And so rebranding that show to give us the runway to talk more about like all these issues together and then connect the dots to marketers under our Marketing Institute umbrella. And so that's how I kind of think of it, is most of my work and my thinking is on the macro level around AI. And then we'll zoom in on the marketing industry and create marketing content and classes and events, but we'll also do the same thing in other industries moving forward.
Yeah. I guess that's also one of the reasons that you and I have seen less of each other, other than the fact that Macon is typically when we do our summer trip to Europe. And that is because we stopped focusing on marketing services 3 years ago. And for the same reason that you've now ended up with SmarterX. And we decided to focus on the technology implementation and integration services. And it was almost to the point where we probably maybe over indexed a little bit, but where I felt like we had to distance ourselves from anything that was marketing, because we don't want to be, even though our name hasn't changed, which maybe wasn't very smart, we're trying to distance ourselves from anything that was marketing specific and focus more on things that were technology specific. So I'm really pleased that you've kind of, with the changes that you've made, because now obviously it gives us opportunity to have more conversations again, because AI and technology, of course, are so closely, it's essentially the same thing. We look at it cross-functionally. So even though we deal with marketing teams, sales teams, customer service teams, and then integrating with the back office systems, we approach it more cross-functionally first and then sort of go deeper after that. What else is there that I haven't yet asked you about AI that you think would be important for us to chat about?
The people who aren't living this stuff every day, who just think it's this arm's length technology that may or may not affect them. And so they're just kind of, or maybe they're just intimidated by it. Like whatever the reason is that you haven't dove in yet to figure it out, I would just highly recommend that you do. You got to figure this stuff out. I don't think people realize how fast the models are improving and how powerful and generally capable they're going to get in 2025. 2025 will be the start of a progressively increasing curve that starts to see a real impact on jobs in the economy. We will start to see headlines about companies making changes to their staffing structures and their future growth plans because of AI's role in their organization. That is inevitable in 2025. And I think the people who go forward and accept that this is going to be a part of our work, the future of work. It's going to be a part of our economy. And they find ways to leverage these tools instead of running from them or being afraid of them. Those are the people who will thrive. There will be disruption to jobs, to businesses, to industries, but the people who are at the frontier solving for this, I think, have an opportunity to reimagine everything, their own career paths, their own businesses, their industries. And so I would just encourage people to just take the next step. However you learn, go, find a podcast to listen to, read a newsletter, get a book, whatever it is, however you learn best, take a course, just do something and take that next step to start getting more and more comfortable and confident with this, because it's going to affect you. It's going to affect your kids, your grandkids, like wherever you're at in life. I have a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I think about this every single day. Like, what is the future for them and what are their careers look like? And I don't have the answers, but I'm very actively trying to see around the corner to solve for this.
I have 3 kids in college right now, so they're 18, 19, and 21 as we speak. And with the ages of your kids specifically, I wonder just in the next 6 years, because we can already see how the college ecosystem is changing and will continue to change and has to change for the same reason that every other industry has to adapt to what's going on. But I can't help thinking that your kids in 6 years, who knows what college will even be or look like and what they'll be learning to really be the unique people that they are and can be in the workplace. It feels like it has to be more sort of pick your own journey, because now you can. Very exciting, very exciting.
It's going to be interesting. And that's the thing, is you can choose to be overwhelmed by this, or I just choose to be optimistic that we're going to find a way through and it's going to be better on the other side. And we're going to solve a bunch of really challenging problems in the world, and we'll make the world a better place. And there's going to be some bumps, but I mean, if I got consumed by what I know those bumps to be, like there's a bunch of knowns that are coming that are going to be painful. But I think at the end of the day, we have an opportunity to create a really abundant future for everyone. And I'm kind of focused on trying to bring that to life.
I mean, you've been at this for a long time, right? If you just think back to maybe the last 2 years where this has really taken off for pretty much everybody, you saw this coming, but everybody else only really saw it coming when it actually happened at the beginning of last year. What have been some of the biggest, I guess, surprises, even for you? You saw this coming, but were there some surprises along the way, even for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. On the technical side, I don't think so. It's been a slow moving train for me, like to see it coming, and like generally speaking, you see 8 to 12 months out and then it ends up happening. It's like, okay, yeah, that seemed obvious. I think the thing that's weird to me is how slow companies are to adopt it, how slow people are to recognize the urgency. And I would lump like economists into that. I'm dumbfounded by how little society seems to understand how significant the change is going to be. And I just like, I keep sitting, and did you ever see that movie? Was it the Netflix one, like Don't Look Up, I think it was called, where like the asteroids are like coming in and people are like, there's no asteroids. And they're literally right there in the sky. Like you can see them. And people just went about their lives as though like the asteroids weren't going to destroy the Earth. And I'm not saying AI is going to destroy the Earth, but I'm saying I have that feeling where you can point to it and be like, look, like it's right there. And like the labs are telling you they're going to have AGI and they're going to have these reasoning, and you're doing nothing. How is that an option? And so I think that's the thing that surprises me, is like the resistance to change, or like the friction for whatever reasons. Like I can't even really put my fingers on why. Like everybody's different, but it's the big ones that bother me, like the schools and the economists and the government leaders who just like, they just don't seem to get it. And I have those moments where I'm like, am I the crazy one? Like, am I just like, but after 8 years, or well, I guess I've been doing this for 13 years now, but like all those years of watching this coming, I've realized that generally speaking, I haven't been wrong much on AI and like what's coming. And I keep trying to figure out, like, am I wrong this time? I don't think so. I think directionally, everything we think is going to happen is probably going to happen. Things will be a little bit different. But I think the only thing that surprised me is just how long it's taken. I really thought we would have mass scale adoption by now. I thought we would have made more changes and we would at least move forward on thinking about some of the hard things. And we just haven't as a society.
Yeah. Which again, like probably comes back down to the same human limitations, right, that we've always had, which is why, as much as we talk about the power of being proactive in anything you do in life, it's so hard when you don't know what the consequences of rather being reactive. It's easier just to be reactive when you don't really know what's coming. And of course, I mean, you obviously have a unique gift of seeing what's coming, but unfortunately, that's always been the case. People who have those kinds of visions are not your average person, even those leading successful companies. And I think one of the things I've always said about when I moved to the US almost 13 years ago now, and trying to sort of compare business in the US to when I lived and worked in Europe or lived and worked in Africa, the one thing that always kept coming back to me is that businesses in the US are successful despite doing a whole bunch of things wrong, right? Because they can, because there's just so much working in their favor. They don't have to be smart or proactive. They can just do what they do, and there's enough market to make them successful. But of course, the ones who are ultimately the most successful and the ones who do not be, who are not disrupted and replaced, those are the really smart ones. But of course, there's not a lot of those. And I think you probably like me as well. We want more of those types of businesses, but the reality is that's not normal human behavior.
I keep telling people, like, I think this is going to be a gradual slope, not a cliff. Like, we're not going to get to June of 2025 and all of a sudden the jobs just go away and everybody's business is, in trouble. I don't think that's how this is going to happen at all.
Yeah.
I think I try and speak with a greater sense of urgency than I have in the past, because I think there's still a window to do something about it. And I think people individually and in their companies and in their industries have a choice still of whether they're going to take advantage of this change or they're going to get run over. And I think that anyone who chooses to accelerate their own AI literacy and capabilities stands to do very, very well. And I want that for people. I want that for businesses. And so I think that I just would really look at 2025 as a chance to get in on the ground floor. Like, you're not going to have missed the boat. Just get in early and figure this stuff out. Be the one that solves for this in your company. I think that's the exciting thing. I don't care if you're an intern or you've been doing this for 30 years. You can be the one to raise your hand and figure it out.
Yeah. Although you have to believe that the intern has the advantage
in some components, but a lot of times what it takes is domain expertise and experience and instinct to figure out what to do with the tools. And that's where you have to blend that. You know how to build the GPTs. I have the domain expertise. Let's team up and do something.
But again, I think it comes back to the mindset, right? It's this mindset of I want to be part of this transformation that's going to happen. So whether you're a leader or an intern, they both have the same opportunity. It comes down to the mindset. What's interesting though is, so what we talk about a lot on this show is the factors. So we talk about 4 pillars that every successful company they do better than their competition in these 4 areas. One is we call people, which gets into leadership and culture and all that kind of communication. The second is process, right? Which we've already talked about earlier. Some of the things you were talking about earlier ultimately lead to process improvement. The third is data, and so metrics, KPIs, etc. And then the fourth is technology or systems. And when I'm trying to help specifically business leaders figure out how to think about this, just bring it back to the basics. Ultimately, AI is the last 2. It's data and technology, right? So if you have bad data, don't even think about investing in technology or AI until you figured out how to clean up your data. But when you do, and if you do, it's going to help you improve your processes, which will lead to efficiencies, etc. But you still have to go to the basics of running a business. So be the best leadership you can be, with all that entails. Always look at things from how are you going to improve your processes across the organization, and then what are the KPIs and metrics that are going to help you do that, and then what is the tech stack that you need across each department and across the entire business to make that continuously better, so that you're driving primarily 2 things: employee experience and customer experience, which then leads to the things that you talked about earlier: efficiency, productivity, revenue, and profitability. That's very high level and it's easy to say, but I'm not saying it's easy to do. But again, you have to simplify these things in order to solve for them, right?
No doubt.
Paul, well, any other advice you could leave us with?
I just go back to the get started. I understand it's abstract and I get the fears and anxieties people have about it, but everybody's feeling those things. And some people are going to choose to just move forward and do something. And other people are going to just get wrapped up in those things and sit still. And I would strongly encourage people to be on the side of the future that is doing something about it, because I think there could be less than desirable outcomes in different businesses and career paths who don't do anything. And I don't want that for people. There's so much incredible free information and education here, not just with our stuff, but like everywhere. Like people share so much every day about the prompts they're using, the use cases they've found. Like it is not hard to go get it. You do not need to go back to school to do this. You don't need to become a data scientist. The future of all of this is human language. If you have words and you have expertise, like you can get value from these tools. And that's how I kind of think about it. Like I have no coding ability at all. And I have now built 5 GPTs that have like transformed my own life and are starting to transform our business and other businesses with 0 programming ability. And that's the future I think is there for people. It's like, know what the tech is capable of. Take your domain expertise and experience and instinct and like work with these tools to create this future.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Or like the example you gave earlier, if you don't feel like you're able to do that, then find a partner, an intern, or someone who you can work together with on that so that you can stick to what you're good at, kind of thing. But I think that's really good advice. Paul, thanks again so much for joining us today. It was really cool to catch up, and I look forward to... Actually, I signed up for something that you're doing next week.
The co-CEO thing?
Yeah, which will be over by the time this episode comes out, I think. But I'm sure you'll be doing more of that stuff. So
yeah. And good news for you, MAECON is in October next year. So maybe you can join us in person.
Ooh, that is...
I think it's October 12th to the 14th, maybe. Mid-October. I should know this, but it's in October.
That's great news.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Paul, thanks again. Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.